Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of bluegrass. You've enjoyed live bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hampton, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. So I'm very happy to welcome Sierra Hall to my podcast, Got Grass. Welcome.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Good. Long time no see.
Yeah, it's good to see you. How you been?
I've been good. No complaints.
Living the podcast life, I see.
Well, yes.
Gotta love it. Hey, I love me a good podcast, you know?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I like doing the shows, but the podcast is so much easier and more fun for me because I just sit here and talk to people, and it's great. It's great.
That sounds fun. I love it. Well, thanks for having me.
Yes. So I usually start out with asking a non-music question, which is, what would a perfect day off be for you if you ever even get one?
Oh gosh. Well, you know what's funny is for me, even on a day off, I'm still into the music thing. Which is really funny because turns out it is my life, but in my job, but it's also my hobby still. So I'd probably have a little music in there somewhere. But I've been really into my kind of coffee espresso hobby lately. So one thing that's been nice about being home a little bit more recently is, I can actually get a nice bag of beans and be here to practice working on pouring my latte art. So I'm usually making my morning cortado, and then I'll have one, in the evening or something. So Justin doesn't drink coffee, so I only get to practice, on my one or two a day. So
I was wondering, I don't drink coffee either, so this is all like Greek to me, but I'm glad you're happy with your coffee.
I've moved on to tea for now, just since I'm talking a lot today. But
Yeah.
but yeah, no,
I'm
enjoy that in the morning, and then like there's nothing like the weather was gorgeous here in Nashville yesterday. So if it's a beautiful day, it looks a little I haven't had time to get out there today, but it looks a little cold and gloomy. But yesterday it was like a perfect, almost like a spring day.
Yeah.
Anytime I can get out and enjoy a nice long walk. I mean, I love that. That's good for me. I just love when I'm home, I love being able to go out and be outside,
Yeah.
enjoy. We've got a lot of deer around where we live. And so I love getting out there and seeing my dear friends, as I say, and just trying to enjoy some peace and quiet and kind of get grounded, after all the traveling and stuff that I tend to be doing.
Yeah. I would imagine between your life and Justin's, there's not all that much time when you're both home at the same time. Is that true?
Well, lately it's been kind of nice because he's not been touring as much. So it tends to be in the past 6 months or so, he's actually been home a lot more, doing like more stuff here in town. He does a lot of recording and session work and stuff like that. So, which he enjoys. He loves being able to do that. And, he's a bit of a homebody sometimes anyway. So lately, if I've been off the road, he's been here. And that's been really nice too, to have some good time together.
Yeah, that is nice. I wanted to congratulate you on your Rhapsody in Blue Grammy. Did you win an award or I know you got nominated for an award. Did you win that Grammy or?
It didn't win. I think it went to Jacob Collier, who's,
Right.
brilliant in his own right. But yeah, I mean, shoot, that's all Bela. We get to just kind of, be grateful to be along for the ride. But yeah, definitely an honor to get to be on that track with him and, be part of that incredible band. That was a super fun thing to get to work up, and we played it live quite a bit too. So it was really, really a fun piece of music.
Yeah. So that's basically the My Bluegrass Heart band that has been touring around with Bela for a while. Same band. Yeah.
Yep. Justin on dobro, Michael Cleveland on fiddle, Brian Sutton on the guitar, and Mark Schatz on the bass.
You've all been on my podcast except for Bela.
Well, hey, he'll have to be up next.
I don't know. I already asked about that, and I was politely declined for now. So we'll see what happens.
Hey, well, you never know. You never
know. So that piece of music, Rhapsody in Blue, was that familiar to you before you were invited to play on that, or was that a new piece for you?
Only as much as like you hear it in popular culture. It wasn't a piece of music I like knew the ins and outs of for sure. But Bela had grown up always loving that piece, and and it is one of those, like, it was really fun when we started playing it, live, and he would kind of play, some of the opening themes of it, that the audience would always giggle because they'd be like, "Oh my God, they're about to play that." So it's a very recognizable, there's themes throughout it that are super recognizable for your even just kind of average listener that might not know the classical music landscape too much, but we hear so many of the little pieces of a score just in everyday life. So it was definitely one I'd heard, but wasn't like, didn't know the full intricacies of, I guess.
Right. That opening is so it is so famous. Of course, I guess it's with the clarinet in the original piece, but hearing it on the banjo was pretty interesting and amazing, really, to hear how he approached it. It was cool.
I mean, leave it to Bela, he ain't scared of nothing. So
Oh man. So I think everybody who listened to this podcast and who's in the music world knows you and about you, but could you give us just a little thumbnail bio for people who might not know your story that well? Would you mind?
yeah, well, I mean, I'm just kind of a bluegrass gal from Tennessee here. I live in Nashville now, but I grew up about 2 hours northeast of here in a little town called Birdstown, and kind of grew up primarily hearing music in church that way, and kind of got introduced to bluegrass in the midst of some of that bluegrass gospel. My dad getting into um, playing a little bit of guitar for my brother and I when we would sing in church and stuff. I had a great uncle that I lived right next door to that was my granny's older sister, actually, and her husband. So they were kind of like a second set of grandparents to me. So, he was a preacher that also played fiddle, mandolin, and guitar a little bit. Like, definitely not bluegrass, more just like old folk melodies. Like, I remember him playing stuff like Wildwood Flower. I remember him on the mandolin playing stuff like Arkansas Traveler too, but like not really. He wouldn't have known like if he went to he never would have been to a bluegrass jam to do that kind of a thing. But he played a lot of hymns and stuff like that on the instrument, and wasn't like some ripping player, but loved it, and just always music was around. So that inspired my dad, and then my dad got my brother and I into it. So I mean, I started pretty young. I was like 8 when I got a mandolin and started learning to play, and got pretty bit by the bluegrass bug right away, and going to jams, and yeah, just kind of unfolded from there, getting to kind of start doing things with at the local level with some of the kind of small local bands, and then you might get invited to one thing to another, and started meeting some of my heroes and things like that pretty early on, just through that kind of natural progression of things.
Was it always mandolin? I mean, I guess when you're young, it was small. It probably appealed to you because it wasn't as big as a guitar. But was it always your choice over your dad?
I thought I was going to play fiddle. And I think the only reason I thought that is because I remember distinctly standing out on my mom and dad's porch one time, and my granny saying to me, "How would you like to play the fiddle?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds fun." And my brother was starting to play guitar a little bit at the time. So, I was like the annoying little sister. If he was playing music, then sure, I'll play music. Why not? It seemed like the thing to do. And so the fiddle was suggested. So I thought, great, why not? But at the time, I was tiny. And so my granny and my great aunt and uncle, they didn't really know, that you could have like a small fiddle, like that you could get like a little half size or something. So they got me just a regular one somewhere. And I mean, I couldn't reach the end of it, arm fully stretched out. I wasn't even close. Um, so my dad, I think, just had the foresight to say, well, I just got a mandolin. I'm learning to play. My Uncle Junior had one of those bowl back mandolins. You know what I'm talking about? We call them a tater
Yeah.
bug mandolin kind of around where
Yeah.
I grew up, but he had an old one of those just kind of sitting around. My dad had saved up enough money to kind of buy himself like a fair, as things go, a pretty cheap F style mandolin, but it was a ton of money for him at the time, especially, my parents didn't have hardly any money growing up. So like, he had invested in this mandolin. He wasn't about to just hand it over to, me at 8 years old to go wild on. But he said, well, how about that little taterbug mandolin? Why don't you take that and I'll use my mandolin and I'll show you how to play a tune, and then from there, um, we'll get you a smaller fiddle and you'll at least know where to put your fingers on the left hand because the tuning is the same. So that was kind of the idea, is like in lieu of being able to play this Christmas violin that I'd gotten basically, which was too big for me, you know, let's use the mandolin as the backup for now. And for some reason, I just got really into it. It was the first thing I made music on, and I got really excited about it, I guess, because I don't remember being at all disappointed that I didn't have
Uh-huh.
a fiddle that I could do anything on. I think it was pretty exciting to be able to make music on the mandolin. And then it kind of went from there to, well, I'll show you a couple more things. My dad was just learning himself, but he started showing me some basic tunes and few chords and things like that. And then it was like one of those things, well, if you're kind of serious about this, if you'll stick with this for a couple months and show us you're serious, we'll get you an actual mandolin that wasn't like the little taterbug mandolin. So I got a little A model mandolin, pretty shortly after, when they saw I was going to be serious about it.
If I gave you a fiddle now, what would you produce on it? Do you
Nothing
play?
you'd want to hear.
So you never kept up any playing on the fiddle, even for fun, you don't fool around with it, or?
I mean, every once in a while. It's funny. I don't have that bad a tone, and my pitch is okay on slow things. But so like I could almost fake something terrible. Like I could play a decent Ashokan farewell. You know what I'm saying? But you wouldn't want to hear me do any kind of fiery fiddling. I never developed the bow arm, to really understand how to get the flow of the bow. So I wish that I'd stuck with it a little bit. I played some. I mean, gosh, both my grannies loved the fiddle on both sides of the family. And it was like everybody, I think, secretly wanted me to be a fiddler. It's like even now, if Justin brings a fiddle around to any kind of family gathering and it's like everybody's just, hey, the fiddle. He plays all the instruments, but the fiddle, it's just like something about it. It's the voice of the people.
I guess it really is, right? It really is was the most common instrument. Everybody had a fiddle, and people played fiddle tunes and sang and hung out. Well, probably more than mandolin, I would guess, back in the day, right? It was just
And
fiddles were
it's, yeah,
everywhere.
and I mean, it's a great instrument. Part of me does wish I'd stuck with it, but I never connected with it as much as the mandolin. And again, maybe that's because mandolin just happened to be the first thing I really got to do something on. And then the progression from switching to mandolin to guitar was such an easy, natural fit, just technique wise, that I spent more time doing that just because it came so naturally. It was like, why not also play guitar? But yeah, every once in a while, I mean, Justin's a great fiddler, so there's often fiddle happening around our house, and every once in a while I'll pick it up and scratch around on it, but
Uh,
nothing anybody needs to hear
yeah, good for
outside
you.
of these four walls.
Good for you. Let's talk about some of your musical collaborators and influences, if you would. If I just mention a name, just tell me your first reaction. If I said Justin Moses, how would you how would you react to that name when you know
My
well?
love. Yeah, best friend. I mean, it's like we've known each other for so many years now, and we're friends first, and so lucky to have a husband and partner in life like him. Just a good human, keeps me grounded. And how lucky am I to have such a good set of ears that I can bounce ideas off of, and have in my corner in that regard too. I think it's a special thing that we can kind of understand each other's musical worlds the way we do, and be able to support each other that way. So
From what little I know of him, I mean, I've met him a few times and talked, but he seems, I think grounded would be a good word to describe Justin. He seems like a very grounded man, very thoughtful, grounded, sweet guy. I mean, that's my impression of him.
he's the definition of dependable and kind, and
Hmm.
all the things I would look for in a partner. I'm
Hmm.
really lucky to have him.
Hmm. All right. How about Tony Rice?
I mean, the OG hero. Tony's Church Street Blues album was the first album I ever got of his. My dad brought it home when I was like 8 years old, probably. I mean, this would have
Mhm.
been at the very beginning of my musical world. So
Yeah.
before I cared about the names Sam Bush or Bela Fleck or Jerry Douglas or people like that, I knew who Tony was. And then it was really through Tony that I started to discover all these other people, by hearing an album like Cold on the Shoulder, So my dad was a big Tony fan, and some of the first music. I mean, I even remember hearing JD Crowe and the New South, 10 Degrees and Getting Colder on a cassette tape that we had of various artists, and it was a lot of like traditional stuff. And I was listening to traditional stuff every week at the jams. I mean, I liked this traditional music. I love the old school stuff, it's a big part of my heart and soul. But I remember hearing that guitar kick off even on that before I knew who Tony was and being like, I don't know what that is, but I like that. It was like it just something from the first few notes I ever heard Tony play or sing. It was a pretty immediate, lifelong hero kind of reaction, and one of the biggest influences I've had for sure.
It's funny because a lot of people I've talked to on the podcast have played with Tony. Did you ever get to play with Tony, by the way? Or
I did, yeah, a few times. I mean, not nearly as much as I would have loved to, but first time I got to play with him was at the Grand Ole Opry with Alison Krauss. I had already met Alison, played with her a few times, and she was so kind, especially in those early years, to invite me to some really cool things to be a part of. And I remember her inviting me to come play the Opry, and it was me and Tony sitting in with Union Station, and I get there to the Opry, and you check in backstage at the artist entrance, and they tell you what dressing room you're going to be in, and they're like, you'll be in dressing room 16 with Tony Rice, and I'm just like, what? Like knowing I was going to probably meet him, but also thinking, oh Lord, we're going to like walk in and be like, hey Tony, what's up? But he was so sweet and like let me play his guitar. We sat there and jammed a couple tunes together. Yeah, he's just very, very nice to me. And it's like I know what a recluse he could be and how he could be a super quiet kind of soul, but especially as a kid, he was really kind and gave me the time of day. And then later when I made my first record, which Ron Block produced from Allison's band, he told me to make a list of all these different musicians. Like I think the way he said it was like, write down a list of 5 fiddle players you love, 5 banjo players you love, 5 bass players you love. Like give me a master list of people that you would dream of having on this record, and we'll put together various bands and sort of just see what makes sense on who we end up using on the record. And then he goes, then write down one dream special guest artist that you would, and I was like, without hesitation, Tony. And he did. He agreed. He came and played on my first record on a couple tracks, which I couldn't believe that we got him to come do that. And then later I opened a few shows for the Tony Rice unit. When I was a teenager, I got to do a handful of shows opening. But we didn't really play together too much. It was just, 2 or 3 times with Allison doing some stuff. Was kind of
yeah,
and then him being on my record sort of being the extent of it. But I cherish it. I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to even be around him at all.
yeah. Yeah, there was something about him. I tried to get people who played with him to explain what it was about him that was so magical, because I had the same feeling. He was my introduction to bluegrass. I heard him way before I heard Bill Monroe. So he was the first person I heard in bluegrass, and I was like you. I said, "Oh my God, that is just from the first vocal thing and the first guitar, he just sucks you right in with this amazing whatever it is." I mean, nobody else had it as far as I know, and
Yeah,
it's
I
just
mean,
interesting.
once in a lifetime kind of artist.
On my list also, I guess you already mentioned a little bit about Bela Fleck. So, I mean, people that you've played with, and what's your reaction when I say the name Bela Fleck?
Oh, driven, genius kind of guy. I mean, one of the greatest improvisers of all time. It's one of the things I think about with playing so much music with him over the last few years. I still say there's hardly a musician I've played with that has that kind of output. From night after night after night, he's like an endless well of ideas and creativity. And that's really fun and inspiring to be up close to and kind of be like, that's somebody who really understands like their instrument, really understands what they're um trying to to get out of it. And it's I don't know, it's really fun thing to be a part of. And you know, he strives for such a high level of things. And I love, you know, as a musician, I love that. I love getting in the weeds. I love rehearsing. I love being, you know, trying to really reach like the highest level that I can, you know, on what I have to offer, you know, which is not on his level, but you know, it's fun to be in the midst of that and be inspired by somebody that's that great at what they do.
I've heard people say that your musical style is more based on your limitations than your aspirations, because if everybody could play everything they wanted to play, everybody would be a musical genius. So obviously, there's certain things that limit you in some way. Like, if I ask you, what limitations do you think you have as a musician that kind of make your style or your approach? Is there anything that comes to mind, or is that too strange a question?
No, I think I totally know what you mean. I think there's a lot of things, you know, it's like I've surrounded myself by all these incredible musicians and even like the guys in my band. It's hilarious. Sometimes I write music, even that I'm just writing it based on whatever I'm thinking or feeling. I'm not somebody that really, you know, thinks about music as much in that theory based kind of way. I think because I grew up playing so much music or you know playing music in such an organic kind of way, learning by ear, even though it's like I can read music a little bit, I can write music a little bit, but like not very well compared to most. And you know, tons of my bluegrass heroes have no clue how to read music, so I don't think that's not unique to me. But I also think that you know, it's funny because sometimes I'll be like, I don't know, guys, this is the thing I wrote, and they'll be like, that is wild, or that's weird. Like this goes to seven, and then this part goes to three here for a second. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just kind of chasing what I think sounds fun and interesting most of the time. And so sometimes I think, even as now I've grown in my understanding of how to kind of calculate those things or be able to like maybe put those things on a page if I needed to, and learning how to kind of communicate it better is a good skill set to have. And sometimes one that I wish, man, I wish I'd honed that even a little bit more as a youngster. But then sometimes I'm also like, yeah, but there is probably something about the limitation of not thinking about it too much because that's just not the way my musical brain works, that maybe allows me to lean into certain creative areas that I might overthink if I knew too much, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah. I heard an interview with Billy Strings recently, and he was talking about, he learned to play by ear. And he said, I always thought I sounded a certain way when I played, but when I heard myself recorded how I actually play, it was not the way I thought I played. And he said it really threw me for a loop because I'm playing all these riffs and things that were familiar and I learned and sounded good to me, but I realized there was so much I didn't know about music theory and stuff that could maybe expand my vocabulary. I thought that was interesting.
Totally. Well, that's kind of the beautiful thing about, you know, even those of us who grew up playing by ear and learning, you know, in the way we did, it's like it's never too late to keep learning. And that's kind of the cool thing. I still feel like I'm constantly learning. And I think the more you surround yourself by people that are really great at what they do or have a lot of understanding of things that you don't, I mean, gosh, it's a blessing to be surrounded by people like that who you can learn from and grow from. And I feel like I've been really lucky to just be surrounded by a lot of people who have a lot to offer in those areas in ways that I don't, you know.
Oh. How did your path lead to Berkeley? Like, how did that take place? Were you looking
Quite,
for that? Are
quite,
they looking for you, or?
quite honestly, I wasn't thinking about going to music school because I mean, I had basically from the time I was 8 years old known that I wanted to play music for a living, you know, and at the time I was really, really steeped in just kind of the traditional bluegrass thing and already had a band going and had put out my first record and kind of thought, well, this is what I want to do. And though I enjoyed school, I wasn't somebody that just hated school and couldn't wait to be out of it. But I also knew I was kind of counting down the days too. Like, okay, well, soon enough, I'm out of here. I'm not going to be doing this anymore. I'm going to be able to focus on playing music. And I had enough opportunity at the time and momentum, I guess, from my youth that, you know, I knew I could sort of at least get started playing and that sort of be my life and my job. And then when I was maybe sophomore or junior in high school, I got an email from somebody at Berkeley, the dean of the school at the time, that basically said, "Hey, we don't know if you're considering music school, but we saw, this video of you playing, and we're really leaning into our we're going to start this American Roots program, and we'd love for you to come to school here. We'd love to offer you a full scholarship if this is something you want to do." And at the time I thought, well, that's really nice, but I didn't know anything about Berkeley. I didn't even know Berkeley was this. I didn't know this was like as special of a thing to be offered at the time. I was just like, okay, well, that's cool. I mean, Boston, I can't imagine moving to Boston. I live in tiny little town called Birdstown, here in Tennessee, long way from home. So I just, and I remember saying to, Allison had kind of become a mentor of mine at that point, and I remember we were talking about something, and I was like, yeah, this music school hit me up about, called Berkeley, maybe mentioning something about a scholarship. And she's like, Berkeley? She's like, yeah, that's a very known school. She's like, you should definitely go check that out, and so then it's like I went up there kind of on her advice and checked out the school. And I remember her saying, well, and then I got offered like an even kind of one more level higher on the scholarship, that it was not just tuition, but it covered my room and board and everything. So they offered me this thing called a presidential award. And I thought, oh my goodness, like this is not what I thought I was going to do. And it was like stressful because I thought, I don't even know, like it was almost like suddenly being, um, thrown into a college situation that you were not prepared for. Like I hadn't been prepping to do this. This wasn't something that I thought was in the cards for me. If I had been planning it, maybe I would have like gone into it with this different mindset, had been working on certain things to, make me feel like I could keep up being there. So it was a little intimidating for sure, but I think when I was offered that particular scholarship, and uh they said, oh, you'll be the first bluegrass person to ever do it, it just was this thing that I was like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do? How can I say no to this? And I remember her saying to me, go for a year, check it out, like if it sucks you can always come home, and as a young person, a year feels like, oh my God, a year, but like now it doesn't. A year kind of flies by like that, but in hindsight, it was such good advice, so I decided, just based on the opportunity, even though I wasn't planning on going, that I probably should give it a try.
Yeah. What was the most valuable thing that you got out of that experience? Were you there 2 years or 1 year?
I did a 2-year program, so
2 years,
four
yeah.
semesters. Yeah. I
Yeah.
missed a lot of school my first semester because I had a tour that was going to be like my first tour that I had ever done, on my own, as a, sans my mother kind of thing,
Hmm.
taking a real band out and playing. And at the time, like it was right when school started, it was that fall, after I graduated. And I remember them saying, we'll figure it out. Just come on up here. You got to, and the scholarship meant if I was going to accept the particular scholarship, I had to start that fall. I couldn't put it off, to the next year. So I went, and the school couldn't have been better to me. They were so kind and supportive. And so it almost feels like I got more like 3 full semesters there and part of my first one. And then after that, I ended up doing a thing called an artist diploma program, which was what made it my scholarship was for 4 years, but the artist diploma was a bit of a unique program that the school offered me to allow me to be able to have a bit more flexibility with my school schedule and traveling and stuff like that. But I do think the biggest thing I got out of it was it gave me like a huge list of all the things that I didn't know because I had not really been in any kind of situation to even like think about music that way. I mean, as bluegrassers, we just don't as much. And it's part of the beauty of it too. You kind of learn through doing. It's a very shared style of music, by somebody saying, hey kid, here's a G chord. Here's how you play Old Joe Clark, and you just learn to do it. And then
Right.
you learn to improvise through, stepping out and being willing to crash and burn a little bit. But it's like there was a lot of just even terminology and things that maybe I might have already had a little bit in my playing, but didn't know how to talk about it, didn't know how to reach for other things, and just, yeah, so many things that even still I kind of go, oh yeah, I remember learning about that, but it felt like at the time most of it just went way over my head because I had, you know, no background in any kind of like formal learning or training, had never had a vocal lesson in my life till I went to Berkeley or
Right.
I don't know, just a very different kind of atmosphere. But I think moving from, if I could say the main thing, probably moving from my small town in Byrdstown to Boston and just being thrust into an environment where I'm on my own. I was 17 when I graduated high school and moved to Boston. And, it's a big town to be in compared to where I grew up, from like 700
Yeah.
people to like somewhere like that where there's people from hundreds of countries, all over the world, different backgrounds, different religions, different, musical styles. Where I grew up, everybody kind of looks and sounds the same. It's, everybody's got my same accent and mostly white people. It's just a small,
Right.
small rural part of Tennessee, which is fine. It's a beautiful way to grow up where everybody kind of has a lot of shared values and things, but it's nice to be in a situation too, I think, for a young person to be pushed out of that bubble too and to experience the world in a slightly bigger way.
Yeah. I guess you were pretty brave to do that. I mean, must have been kind of a culture shock to go from small town Tennessee to Boston. Like here you are in this big, I mean, it's not as big as New York, but it's a big city and there's a lot going on. It's busy and, like you say, wide range of people and cultures. And that was brave, you have to say.
Well, I think that I traveled. It's not like I hadn't toured. I'd been to Boston. Like uh I toured quite a bit, throughout my early teenage years and stuff. So I kind of, I had 3 or 4 years of good traveling in between stuff was cool. So it wasn't like a complete culture shock in that way. But you leave home, it's the closing of a chapter. I mean, I've not when I left, when my mom dropped me off, we drove up and she dropped me off. I mean, I remember crying when she drove away because I was like, that's the end of that chapter, So I've never lived back home since. So it's it's kind of funny how you kind of close one chapter, but yeah, that part of it just, I think I had enough awareness even then to realize that kind of felt like the end of
Your
my
youth.
home Byrdstown life. I knew I probably
Yeah.
would never live in Byrdstown again if that made
Hmm.
sense. And I
Yeah.
haven't, even though I love it and it's forever home. But yeah, definitely a scary jump to make.
Did you ever write a song about Birdstown or called Birdstown? Like, did that come up in any of your songs that you wrote? Like,
Just last year, I wrote one finally
did.
called Birdstown. I don't think nobody's heard it yet. My band just
Uh,
heard it, but one of these days I'll do something with it.
yeah. I remember you played up here. I think it was in 2010. I believe you were about 18 years old with your Highway 111 band, right? And
I remember.
yeah. Was there someone kind of looking out for you when you were touring in those days? I talked to Clay Hess on my podcast, and he said, "Oh, I felt like the old man in that band." He said,
Oh, he was like our Papa Bear out there on the road. Yeah, I was really lucky to get to share the stage with him. I mean, just such an incredible musician and singer in his own right. Just, love that dude. But yeah, he came along at a time and so willingly jumped into this situation with us youngsters, when he was one of the only ones that could rent a car, even at that time, which, I'm just really lucky to have somebody like that. That was, you know, a good person, a good human to have on the road. He definitely was kind of, I don't know, whether he thought of it much that way or not, it always felt like I knew he was looking out for us a little bit, in that situation. So feel lucky to have got to share that time on the road with him for sure.
yeah. From the way he described it, it sounded like he was kind of looking out for you. I mean, he said, I felt like an adult, but I kind of felt like I had to keep all these kids, you know, just watch out for them. They're all young, and I was
Yeah,
older, and I had to be the grown up all the time.
yeah, totally.
That's funny.
Totally. He's father already had a couple kids of his own, so he knew he knew
Um,
what to look out for.
yeah, yeah. Um, this is a little more of a personal question, but at any time in your life, did you ever get discouraged or frustrated or even depressed about life or music, where you actually thought about giving up for a while, or did you ever have a time in your life where you just didn't really feel it, or has it been just go go
Um,
go since you were 8?
well, I would say this whole thing of choosing to have your passion and the thing you care about, like I've wanted all this since I was, so young. I don't even know life before it anymore. You know what I mean? It's hard to even
Yeah.
imagine a life where like music and this being my path wasn't something that I've thought about, and kind of almost like a life I've lived more than a job or something like that. It's more of a, I don't know, kind of, not to be all cheesy, but it kind of has always felt like a bit of a calling, or just something that of all the of all the things that one questions in life, and the kind of like gray areas, doing this has never felt like a gray area to me. It's always felt like something that it kind of, I mean, to be honest, it's not about like even skill level or talent or anything like that. I mean, I guess there's a certain amount of that, like kind of having enough belief in yourself that you can, and maybe because I had opportunities and support from my heroes and things like that early on, maybe that's propelled me to have that belief, and my parents being supportive. I think they worked these jobs that their whole life, they've kind of worked jobs that they've not been passionate about, and haven't like made a ton of money doing it either. So it's kind of like, I think they were just like, this is something you can be happy doing. There was just never any, oh, you should have it sounds funny, but they never even were like, you should have a backup plan. I think they just knew, like, hey, this is it. I'm going for it. This is what I'm doing. Now, so that being said, there's always been a real clarity to me that this is what I'm going to do. So giving up has never felt like an option. It's just never even felt like an option. But are there times that it gets like severe anxiety about it all, those bouts of depression, if you will, or feeling down about this or that to do with it? Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like a friend of mine described it as having a career is kind of like somebody's constantly airing up this balloon, and the balloon is rising and the balloon is rising. And then somebody comes with a safety pin and goes pop, and then you deflate, and then you're back down, and then you get patched up, and then you start airing your balloon up again. It's this weird emotional roller coaster of highs and lows. The highs, and I think when you're young, the highs are like so high and the lows are so low, and you feel it all so deeply because you care so much. And I've spent my whole life caring about all this in the deepest of ways. I think as I'm getting older, though, I'm doing a much better job of being kind of like middle of the road, like grounded and centered, and I think age helps that, experience with all that. And maybe just also a lot of years of working really hard throughout my teenage years and my 20s, that I've got enough experience maybe under my belt that makes you feel like you can go, okay, well, maybe I've put in enough work that I can kind of breathe for a minute or something. But there is yeah, there's something that I feel I've done a better job here in my early 30s about being, more grounded in the not letting the highs carry me too high and not letting the lows bring me too low. Like kind of being excited, but like, cool, glad this opportunity's happened, or glad that we're seeing the success here. But then when something disappointing happens or something doesn't go the way you want, not letting that be the thing that just like pummels my everything, you know, because it's easy for that to happen when you're a weirdly vulnerable artist, as most of us are, and sensitive about it all because you can't help but be.
Yeah, I would think that if you let the highs get too high and the lows get too low over time, it would be exhausting and probably really tough on your mental health because, as you say, you're up and down, and I think that would be hard until you realize that you kind of have to find a little middle ground, right? To
Totally. And
take
I
care of
mean,
yourself.
a lot of friends and people struggle with it, it's a real thing. I think that's why a lot of artists struggle with, depression and like certain mental illness things, is because it's a It's funny. It's like I've never had another job outside of music, and
Mm.
sometimes I think about my parents who've worked and family members who've worked these really like blue collar kind of jobs. And I know
Hmm.
what it looks like to, see people go work factory jobs or hard labor jobs. And I'm not scared of work in that way, but sometimes I do think, man, I don't know what it would be like though to have a job where you could just do your 8 hours and then turn it off either. It's sort of like this never-ending commitment. So I think I'm trying to always find the balance, especially as I get older, of being like, well, music has been my life since I was a kid, and it's kind of been my everything. But how do you find the balance of going, where do my priorities lie too? And it can't be all there is. It can't be all there is because I need to
Yeah.
know who I am aside from that too. And so that's something I'm always trying to keep in check as I get older. And like I said, having somebody like Justin around helps keep me grounded in that way. And I'm lucky to have a lot of just like good people who love me well, friends that keep me sane and grounded and all
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stuff. And people need that. We need people around us who can, you know, both give us a reality check when we need it and be hard on us when we need it, but also, uplift us when we're telling ourselves things that aren't true too.
Yeah. It's funny because the first question I asked you about what you do when you have a day off, most people I've asked this question to say, I pick up my instrument and play it. It's like it's your career, it's your hobby, it's your passion, it's everything. But and some of the older people said, well, like Doyle Lawson, well, I like to drive around in my convertible and blah blah blah. They reach a little balance where they've made all their success, and they realize that you have to take time to just go out with your wife and drive around or whatever.
Yeah.
But many people said just what you said. I'm always looking for an instrument to pick up and fool around with. It's what
Well,
you
I think
do.
it's nice to be able to spend time with your instrument in a non like work related setting, if that makes sense. When music becomes your career, you spend a lot of time working on whatever's in front of you. Like, what do you have coming up? What do you have to prepare for? What do you have to practice for? What do you have to learn? Or, this session, this interview, this whatever, you're kind of your schedule can dictate a little bit of how you spend your musical time. And so, yeah, when you find yourself with a day with nothing going on, to be able to just spend casual time as a musician is like feels like a real fun luxury you don't always get. So, it makes sense to me why a lot of people would say that and reach for an instrument in those moments because it's a different kind of thing to spend time with an instrument or making music in a way that's more akin to the way it would be long before any of us did it as a career.
Oh, yeah. So if you were someplace, I don't know where, and you didn't have your mandolin around for 4 days, would you freak out, or would you be able to just put it aside and go with the flow?
No, I'd be okay. There's plenty of times where I wouldn't say plenty of times, but there's definitely been times where I've kind of intentionally been like, okay, I'm going on this trip and I'm not going to take an instrument. I'm guilty of taking an instrument for sure. But yeah, there are times where I might take an instrument and barely touch it. And if anything, I would say in those moments, oftentimes, I think that it can actually re-inspire. Like there's something kind of good I find sometimes about taking a break from it and coming back fresh because a lot of times it just feels different. You feel kind of rejuvenated. So I actually think it's healthy to do that. Healthy to just, go a few days here and there and you know, not be thinking about it or well, I'm
Right.
probably thinking about it whether I'm playing or not, but
Uh,
but but just yeah, to not actually have access to it can actually be a good thing.
how much time do we have? I know you have to be somewhere. I don't want to just end this abruptly. So,
My next thing is at 4 my time.
okay,
So I've got about,
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Does that work?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I just want to talk a little bit about I have a lot of questions, but I'm not going to go everywhere. You have a tour coming up in the spring, which sounds pretty exciting with, if I read this correctly, Bob Dylan, Billy Strings, and Willie Nelson. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. Just, pretty wild. That was an exciting phone call to get. That's, that I would rank that as one of the highs that I would
Mm.
say, I go, well, that's really exciting. But, I kind of try to level that with, okay, cool. Well, that's let's put that in the, let's log that in the, exciting category, but like, also again, kind of going, what, that's still a small piece of the puzzle compared to all the other things I've got to think about. So, but yeah, I'm so thrilled. I feel honored to get to be a part of that. I mean, I heard, from my manager and agents that like we probably had an offer coming to be part of, some of the shows on the Outlaw tour. I had been out on like 3 shows with Sturgill Simpson right before the Bela Flex tour started, that very first My Bluegrass Heart tour that we did. So I couldn't do all of the things, right? So, but Sturgill was like, well, hey, just come out and sit in with us on the first 3 if you want, and then you can leave and go do your next thing. So I went and I got to do 3 shows with Sturgill on the Outlaw tour several years ago, and I remember thinking, oh man, like these shows are so cool. How fun is this? Getting to hear Willie every night and all these great bands. And so I'd kind of always been kind of hoping that maybe we'd eventually get to do one. Was definitely kind of on my list of things that I was kind of hoping for. And so when they said, "Oh, I think we're gonna get the offer for some Outlaw shows," I was like, "Oh, that's exciting." And I would have been happy to do them no matter what. I mean, anything with Willie would be cool. But then when my agents, well, my manager, I guess, was the one who said, okay, so we got the offer, it's these 8 shows in May, and the lineups, Willie, Bob Dylan, Billy Strings, and you. I was like, wait, what? And some of the venues, at least a couple venues, are bucket list venues for me, getting to play the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles, which I saw Sarah Bareilles live there, who I love. And, that'll be a special one for us, I think. And then also getting to play like the Gorge out in Washington. I've heard so many people talk about that venue as being just like one of the coolest venues in the country. So like I'm excited all the way around. I think it's going to be a really, really cool thing to get to be a part of.
So that would be your band will be one of the bands playing on the tour. Will you have the chance to
Yeah.
play like Blowing in the Wind with Bob Dylan yourself, do you think, or that won't probably happen?
I mean, I think Bob, from what I hear, sounds like he could be a recluse. So I don't even know if I'll
Yeah.
get to meet him. But hey, if Bob asks, you better believe I'll be there. If he decides he needs some mandolin, put me in.
Yeah.
I'm down. I'm such a fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't even anticipate getting to meet him, to be honest. But if I do, that will sure be a grand surprise.
I asked people this question too. If you could have sat down and played with music with anybody in history together, just in the living room on the couch for a couple hours, who who do you think you would have chosen or would choose, dead or alive? I don't know. Just as anybody in your life that you say, "Wow, I really would have loved to play a few songs with this person or sing a few songs."
Well, I mean, because I never got to meet him in person or hear him live in person, I could probably say Bill Monroe would be a pretty, I know it sounds like a stock answer, but truly, I mean, I'm my only my only connection is through all the people that did get to meet him and play with him. So, I mean, I never, I remember being at Ricky Skaggs' Hall of Fame induction ceremony at the Country Music Hall of Fame. I got to do a performance with Garth Brooks as part of that, like doing Highway 40 Blues. I got to play the mandolin part, honoring Ricky that night. And I was backstage. I had just performed, and they brought the Bill Monroe mandolin out for him to play. And I'd only seen it behind the glass. I mean, they don't let people touch that mandolin. It's
Right.
very like curated by the museum. It's kind of a pretty protected instrument at this point. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to let Ricky play that mandolin. And I just remember like being like, I was backstage and I was like, I've got to be in the room. And so I like went side stage, and like just hearing that instrument, I like weirdly ugly cried. It was straight. It was a very strange emotional experience because I thought that's the closest I can get to it, getting to hear that instrument from somebody else, or being able to like experience, the stories of Bill from other people. But like I was like, that instrument and Bill is why we're all doing this. If it wasn't for that
Right.
and all the influences that came after it, I mean, I sure wouldn't be here. doing this.
Yeah.
So, so that one, I mean, to me, that feels like a pretty special one. Living, I want to hang out with Dolly more.
Uh,
I've met her briefly, but if I really can have my choice of any artist to hang with or play a few songs with, I think that'd probably be my top answer.
could you approach someone like Dolly Parton and say, "Hey, can we do a duet together and record a couple of things?" Or is that kind of stuff happen?
I mean, I technically know how to get a hold of her people, so maybe one of these days I'll be brave enough to ask.
Yeah, that's funny.
I've got to be on a couple recordings with her remotely and have weirdly done a few things with her, but never in the same room together, like in the recorded format. And I've even got to be on stage with her at the Newport Folk Festival as part of this big thing that Brandy Carlisle did, and it's like,
Right.
well, there's Dolly. But so it's like we kind of, I feel like I've been oh so close and kind of gotten to be in her presence, and I've recorded with her, and she gave me a quote for my first record, and like, there's been some connection there, but I've never really got to like, have much of a hang with her. So one of these days that would
Yeah.
be really special, but everybody wants that from Dolly. So,
Right, right, right.
I'm in good company of people that wish for that. So, we'll see.
So if you look back on your life at the ripe old age of what, 33 you are? 33? Yeah.
Yep.
Is there anything that you would have done differently knowing what you know now in terms of your career or relationships or music, or are you just pretty happy with the way things are going and it's kind of cruising along the way you would have chosen?
No, honestly. I mean, I'm tempted to say no because I think that I'm just kind of a believer things happen the way they're supposed to. And I also don't know where my story will end up. And I think
Mm.
sometimes as you might think one thing in a particular moment, and then actually, as you get further into the book, you're like, oh, actually, if I hadn't done this and this and this, then I wouldn't be here. So, I'm more tempted to say probably not.
Mm.
Because even the things that I've counted as, you know, things that felt like disappointments or whatever, things that you learn from, they're just that you learn from them. And I think
Hmm.
they shape you. And that's part of the growing process. So yeah, I try to not think about it too much, in terms of like looking backwards.
Hmm.
Honestly, good or bad. Because I think like, if you dwell too much on cool stuff you've done, well, okay, but you already did that. Like, it's the same kind of thing. Might as well be thinking about, living in the moment and trying to think about what's next.
So would you say that's kind of your personal philosophy or credo to kind of just live in the moment for what's in front of you? Would that be a good way to describe how you look at life?
Well, funny enough, Justin and I went on a walk yesterday and we were talking about that. We're talking about like, it's a lot easier, it seems, to maintain a happy mindset and existence with all things, whether it's career, life, whatever, if you can just remember to like be in the moment and stop worrying too much about yesterday or tomorrow. Just being in the moment. We were literally just talking about that. And I know it sounds cliche, but it's like, I do think there's a lot of truth in that if you just think about like, what blessings do I have in front of me right now? There's always something to be grateful for, always something to stop and uh, sort of ground yourself with. And that, if we really want to find things to stress about, we will. And believe me, I mean, I'm the queen of that, because I tend to keep my to-do list pretty full, and I'm always just like, struggling to keep up sometimes. So I'm trying to do a better job of like not letting that stuff get in the way of you know, my living in the moment. Because I do think that's a very beautiful thing, and that, this is the time we have and we're not going to get it back. It's hard to
Yeah.
remember that, but it's true. So, I think the more I can remember that, the more it feels easier to just be happy and grateful.
Yeah. I just thought of this one last question. Is there anyone or anything that really cracks you up and makes you laugh hysterically? I like the comic Dustin in the newspaper. I don't know if you see that, but to me, every morning I read that and just like I laugh my butt off. I don't know, something
Oh,
about
I
it.
love it.
It's is there anything like that for you that really like makes you or something that Justin says? I don't know. Is there anything that really makes you crack up aside from this question?
Um, yeah, I mean, I want to say yeah, because like, well, we're always sending each other. People make those jokes. We are the couple that we're Instagram DMing each other memes and stuff constantly. Like, I'll see something funny and I'll send it to him, or he'll see something funny and send it to me. But like, as far as like one particular thing, I'm trying to think. There's like one particular thing, but I don't know if there's like one reoccurring thing, but definitely, I love finding things to make me laugh or finding fun shows. He and I tend to watch a lot of like if we watch a show together, a lot of times it's like a real, serious something, like we just finished The Last of Us
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
together, it's like we'll watch something like that. And then I'm like, okay, I need to be over here watching like Grace and Frankie or something silly on my end, to make up for it. So
I hear you. I hear you. Well, I know you've got to go. You're very busy. A lot of people are looking for a piece of your time, which I was, and I really appreciate you coming on here today. It was nice to catch up and hear about your thoughts and your what's happening with you. And I just want to thank you again for coming on, Sierra. It's been fun talking, and give my best to Justin, and good luck with your tour and everything you're doing. Appreciate it.
thank you, Chris. Well, glad this finally worked out to chat, and thanks for having me on.
Yep. Good luck.
Thanks. See you later.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.